Welcome everyone to our lucky 13th public lecture in the Humanities Research Centre's 2022 series, Works That Shape the World, here at the ANU on this very sacred public holiday, AFL Grand Final Eve. This year's public lecture series, as you know, if you've joined us before, we're focusing on religion. So let's begin, as we always do here at the ANU, by paying our respects to the elders of the Ngunnawal and the Ngambri people. It's their land that the ANU is built upon here in Canberra. And it's my pleasure today to welcome our speaker, Anna Halifax. Anna's Associate Professor of Sociology at Deakin University in Melbourne, a Fellow of the Alfred Deakin Institute for Citizenship and Globalization, and also President of the Australian Association for the Study of Religion. Now, Anna's research interests include religious diversity and interreligious relations. This was the topic of her first book, The Multi-Faith Movement, Global Risks and Cosmopolitan Solutions. Also spirituality, contemplative practices, and Buddhism, which is of course the topic of today's talk. Anna is also the co-author of Freedoms, Faiths, and Futures, Teenage Australians on Religion, Sexuality and Diversity, co-authored with the late Gary Baumer, with ANU's Mary Lou Rasmussen, and with Andrew Singleton, who'll be up here in Canberra to present the 2022 Hans Moll Memorial Lecture in November. So it's my pleasure to welcome Anna Halifax to speak to us today on a classic work of Buddhism, The Precious Treasury of the Basic Space of Phenomena by Longchen Rabjam.
Thank you very much. So I'd also like to begin by acknowledging the Wurundjeri peoples of the Kulin Nations as the traditional custodians of the unceded territory I am on today, and to also pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and future. I'd like to thank Ibrahim and the HRC organizers for this opportunity to be part of this series on works that shape the world, and to be able to speak with you all about Longchen Rabjam's The Precious Treasury of the Basic Space of Phenomena. So I'd like to begin briefly also with my own Radical Dzogchen version of a refuge and dedication that is customarily recited at the beginning of any Tibetan Buddhist teaching or practice. So in this case, I'd just like us all to pause for a moment and to rest in the natural state, the nature of mind, for the benefit of all sentient beings. Homage to glorious Samanta Bhadra, the primordial, compassionate, all good, the blue Buddha, Kuntazampo, who represents the great perfection in human form. Naturally occurring timeless awareness, utterly lucid, awakened mind, is something marvelous and superb, primordially and spontaneously present. It is the treasury from which comes the universe of appearances and possibilities, whether of samsara or nirvana. Homage to that unwavering state, free of elaboration, the very pinnacle of spiritual approaches, the expanse in which the sun and moon orbit the most majestic mountain, is the expanse of the Vajra Heart Essence, spontaneously present and utterly lucid, the expanse of the naturally settled state that entails no effort or achievement. Listen as I explain this superb, timelessly infinite expanse. So thus begins The Precious Treasury of the Basic Space of Phenomena by Longchen Rabjam. It is one of his 7 treasuries, known as the Great Perfection Teachings of Dzogchen Buddhism. Longchenpa is one of the most revered Tibetan Dzogchen scholars and teachers who lived in the 14th century and spent a significant amount of his life in retreat in Tibet and Bhutan. Described as the pinnacle of spiritual approaches, this text focuses on Longchenpa's radical call to non-meditation, to rest in the natural state of timeless awareness, the utterly lucid awakened mind. So in this lecture, I will refer to the Padma Publishing Richard Barron 2001 translations of Longchenpa's The Precious Treasury of the Basic Space of Phenomena, its source verses and its commentary, as well as Keith Dowman's translation and commentary, Spaciousness, the Radical Dzogchen of the Vajra Heart Essence, and also two recent PhD theses on Longchenpa, one by Giri Erfagan and the other by Adam S. Lobel, who both draw heavily on David Germano, Sam Van Schaik's, and Stefan Aguileri's work. So before doing so, I will also briefly begin with my own positionality statement in relation to Longchenpa and what Dowman calls Radical Dzogchen, and also the recent popularization of Dzogchen in contemporary society. I will then discuss the more controversial aspects of non-duality and non-meditation in Longchenpa's Radical Dzogchen teachings, alongside their emphasis on what Lobel calls compassionate responsiveness and its relationship to ethics and non-action. I had a profound, unexpected, spontaneous spiritual experience when I was 19 years old, in a very mundane setting, but in extraordinary circumstances, but with no prior meditation training. I suddenly felt a profound sense of bliss and peace, completely beyond words. I literally could not make any sense of it, but it propelled me to undertake a spiritual quest alongside many of my Gen X peers in the early 90s. So after decades of reading and practicing ecofeminist, yogic, and various Buddhist teachings in and beyond Australia, including 2 highly formative years non-meditating in the Daintree rainforest, about 8 years ago, I participated in a Dzogchen ritual by a respected Tibetan Rinpoche, Karma Lundub, who then recommended that I read The Precious Treasury of the Basic Space of Phenomena. This was no doubt the text that I had been looking for 25 years, and it continues to inspire my Dzogchen non-meditation. I ceased all of my previous ritualized Tibetan Tantric Buddhist practice and began studying this text and non-practicing on my own. However, I had some questions, and I also wanted to check that my understanding of it was correct. I started searching for a teacher, but with all due respect, many of the most accomplished contemporary Dzogchen teachers who I was fortunate enough to be able to meet and study briefly with teach a blend of both the Great Perfection and the Tantric Gradual Path teachings. And even many of Longchenpa's own earlier texts combine these two approaches. I was looking for someone who taught as Longchenpa did in what are said to be his 2 final and most profound texts. This one, The Precious Treasury of the Basic Space of Phenomena, and also The Way of Abiding. Eventually, I found Keith Dowman, a highly respected translator of Dzogchen texts and a Radical Dzogchen teacher who had studied with many great Tibetan Dzogchen masters. We began corresponding via email in 2019, and I attended many of his online talks and retreats during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, including participating in a 16-day Basuku retreat in 2020. And then I spent my long service leave non-meditating again in the enchanting wildwoods of the Daintree rainforest in 2021. So Dowman approaches Dzogchen and teaches online with the radical poetic simplicity of Longchenpa, using few words and radically stating that the Treksho breakthrough practice of simply sitting is the best form of non-meditation for our current times. He also teaches according to Longchenpa's instruction, not seeking fame or fortune, and has actually a very small online presence. As Dowman states, the basic space of phenomena's clarity in pointing out the natural great perfection is unsurpassed. By contrast, the internet is awash with many high-profile contemporary teachers of non-duality, mostly focused on Advaita Vedanta, such as Richard Rohr, Tony Parsons, and Muji. Dzogchen has also recently been popularized by Sam Harris in his book and podcast, Waking Up. So Harris studied with esteemed Dzogchen master Tulku Urgyen Rinpoche, And in his book, Harris, which actually makes no mention of Longchenpa, Harris focuses largely on Advaita Vedanta and Dzogchen's non-dual perception, where consciousness is intrinsically free of self, quote, and stresses the need to practice gaining familiarity with the intrinsic selflessness of awareness to the point of stability. So again, a more kind of graduated process. So a detailed discussion of these non-duality proponents are beyond the scope of this paper. Suffice to say that while there are some similarities, they also differ from Longchenpa's, Dowman's, and my interpretation of Radical Dzogchen, which I will turn to now. And my understandings have also more recently been very much enriched by reading Lobel's wonderful thesis on Longchenpa, which was recommended to me by Paul Croucher, and particularly Lobel's insights on compassionate responsiveness. Longchen Rabjam Drime Oza is widely and affectionately known as Longchenpa. He is arguably the most revered scholar and practitioner of the Great Perfection or Dzogchen teachings. Longchenpa's Dzogchen is seen by many as radical and controversial, given its emphasis on spontaneous awakening through effortless ease. Numerous volumes have been written on Longchenpa and Dzogchen, so to briefly condense this history and the essence of these teachings into one lecture at first seems impossible. And yet it is actually the point of Radical Dzogchen that this essence can be realized in a spontaneous moment by anyone at any time. So consequently, I will briefly focus on four main aspects of this sublime text, the Precious Treasury of the basic space of phenomena. And these are the natural state, rest, non-action, non-duality, and compassionate responsiveness, after providing a brief background on Dzogchen and Longchenpa himself. The Great Perfection Dzogchen teaching combine Nyingma Tibetan Buddhist ideas derived from Indian, Chinese, and Korean Buddhism with indigenous Bon Tibetan traditions. Dzogchen teachings first emerged in the 8th century Tibet, with the earliest mention of Dzogchen in the Tantric Yoga Nyingma text, the Guru Gadaba Tantra, which was also known as, or is known as, the secret nucleus or secret essence, and was revealed to Garab Dorje, who was the first human Dzogchen master. Tantric Great Yoga and the Dzogchen Great Perfection teachings were intertwined in this early period, and there is ongoing debate regarding how interwoven they continue to be to this day. Some renowned scholars and practitioners, for example, argue that the Dzogchen view is there to inspire a gradual path of tantric practice and ritual, while others believe that the Great Perfection teachings, and particularly the latter works of Longchenpa, reveal a radical Dzogchen view of non-action and spontaneous realization inspired by these earlier 8th century Dzogchen texts and also the work of the Chinese master Hashang Mohayan. Alongside Van Schaik and Lobel, I too espouse this latter position. And this mirrors the so-called Great Samye debate between the gradual and spontaneous approaches that Mohayan lost, which relegated the spontaneous approach to the periphery of Tibetan Buddhism, where it remains to this day. As Lobel explains, the early Great Perfection Dzogchen texts, known as the Mind series, from the 8th to the 10th centuries, emphasize a radical rejection of complex tantric ritual and techniques, favoring instead a rhetoric of simplicity, naturalness, and absence of all effort. This is underpinned by an unwavering commitment to the ontological perfection and goodness of all being, embodied in the primordial Buddha named All Good. The All Good is equated with the nature of mind, which is innately pure, knowing, spontaneous, and luminous. Instead of effort and structured techniques, this all good reality is always there and will simply and spontaneously manifest when striving and struggle are released. These Mind series texts include the root tantra of the all-knowing monarch, which inspired Longchenpa's basic space of phenomena. Many profound and poetic passages from these mind series texts are included in Longchenpa's own commentary on the basic space of phenomena, called A Treasure Trove of Scriptural Transmission. In the period that followed this first phase of Dzogchen in Tibet, the Tantric and Great Perfection teachings became increasingly intermixed again, and Longchenpa's many earlier works exemplify this more gradual approach to enlightenment. Longchenpa was taught the Nyingma, including the Great Perfection teachings, by his father, an aristocratic tantric yogi, at a time when the Nyingma school had a marginal status in the 14th century compared to the Sakya, Kagyu, and Kadam schools. Longchenpa studied many texts from these traditions at the famous Tibetan Samye monastery, which he entered when he was 12 years old. At 18, he studied at the esteemed Sangpu University outside of Lhasa for 7 years before he left, turning away from scholastic institutional Tibetan Buddhism towards a more radical solitary practice of non-meditation and retreat in nature, in mountains, forests, and caves. Longchenpa lived and studied with the Great Perfection teacher, Kamaradza, for 3 years, who shared oral transmissions of these early Dzogchen mind series teachings with him during this time. Longchenpa eventually settled in his own retreat encampment at White Skull Mountain in Tibet, where he lived at times in a solitary cave and wrote many of his great works. For 2 brief years in 1348 to 50, he was asked by Gonpa Kunrin, the leader of the Drigung clan, to restore an early Dzogchen monastery of Zai Lagang, thus gaining a new level of recognition as a resurrector of authentic Buddhism with a high status patron. But this did not last long, as Longchenpa was forced into exile in Bhutan in 1354 by Changyung Gyaltsen, the then leader of the Pagmodri clan, given Longchenpa was the rival Drigung clan's leader's teacher. It was in Bhutan, at the Tarpaling monastery, ideal for spiritual retreat, that Longchenpa is thought to have written most, or at least some, of the Precious Treasury of the basic space of phenomena, and also the Way of Abiding. Scholars argue that these 2 texts are among his final works and are the pinnacle of his prolific teachings, having penned at least 307 texts during his lifetime. Longchenpa returned to White Skull Mountain in 1360 and died there in 1364, aged 56, having reconciled with Changchub Gyaltsen. It is in these final years that he is thought to have finished the basic space of phenomena and then its commentary. Longchenpa was, as Erfagan stresses, a living embodiment of Dzogchen pedagogy, given his preference for non-institutionalized Buddhism and non-material retreat in forests, mountains, and caves, a reoccurring theme in his whole body of work. And I would add here, and drawing very much on Lobel's analysis, that Longchenpa's commitment to teach the Dharma, as evidenced by his prolific works, and notably Radical Dzogchen, makes him also an embodiment of compassionate responsiveness alongside all of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas before and after him. And I will return to this in more detail later. The Great Perfection, described by Longchenpa as the natural state, is ultimately ineffable and beyond limited human concepts. The poetic basic space of phenomena has been compared to the Tao Te Ching, which similarly describes the Tao as that which cannot be named. Longchenpa, however, does use terms in the basic space of phenomena to describe the qualities of the nature of awakened mind as primordially pure, supreme bliss, and as spacious, pristine, and utterly lucid, a wholly positive state. And he does so by drawing on the early Dzogchen texts described in details in his own commentary. So Longchenpa states in the basic space of phenomena, given that everything is wholly positive, arising as a single state of spontaneous presence, that which is sublime and without rival, the greatest of the great, within which everything without exception is subsumed, is the wholly positive basic space of phenomena. This blissful, sublime heart essence is the ground of being, naturally occurring, timeless awareness. Spontaneous realization of this innermost heart essence is what Longchenpa calls the heart drop. As Dowman explains, Radical Dzogchen is what we have always known when we listen to our deep heart's core and open our eyes to what is around us. All beings, the natural world, everything animate or inanimate comes from this great perfection, is it and goes back to it. It is timeless and we are never separate from it. Both samsara, the worldly cycle of suffering, and nirvana, the peaceful state beyond suffering, are a part of it also. So I argue that Longchenpa's Radical Dzogchen teachings, as described in the basic space of phenomena, are controversial for four main reasons. The first is that they emphasize spontaneous awakening rather than awakening being a causal and gradual process. As a result, and secondly, they prioritize rest, non-meditation and non-action rather than effort and striving required in most other forms of Tibetan Buddhist practice, or all Buddhist practice for that matter. They also stress non-duality rather than the typical Buddhist view of samsara as something to be liberated from and nirvana as something to strive toward. And finally, and related to these first 3 points, Longchenpa's teachings can mistakenly be thought of as being nihilistic and unethical, given that Buddhist ethics typically views virtuous actions and Buddhist techniques and practices as producing positive merit and karmic results leading to liberation, and thereby the negation of such action is seen by many as highly problematic. These concerns, however, are unfounded when Longchenpa's great perfection teachings are understood and actualized. Longchenpa's radical view and life of retreat in nature also disrupted and continues to disrupt hierarchical institutions of power in Tibetan Buddhism. And this is another main reason why they are so often criticized and rejected. Radical Dzogchen also offers a much needed antidote to the fast-paced destructive forces of neoliberal capitalist overconsumption, which makes it particularly relevant for our times, but also highly disruptive to prevailing power structures of contemporary neoliberal societies. As Lobel explains, spontaneous presence means that something exists without coming into being through causes and effects. It is just there, suddenly, naturally, freely, and completely. So in this way, the opposite of spontaneity is causality. And so according to Longchenpa, effort and striving can actually impede the realization of one's natural state. Longchenpa describes this true nature of phenomena as suchness. It involves no effort or achievement or anything needing to be done. Longchenpa explains, within mind itself, the essence of awakened mind, there is no view to cultivate in meditation, no conduct to undertake, no fruition to achieve, no levels of realization or paths to traverse, no mandala to visualize, no recitation, repetition, or stage of completion, no empowerment to be bestowed, and no samaya to uphold. In this pure state, that is the true nature of phenomena, timelessly and spontaneously present, such adventitious factors of developmental effort and causality are transcended. The supreme teaching involves no concentrated effort to accept or reject. Naturally occurring timeless awareness, the essence of awakened mind itself, is made fully evident in that one does not waver from the direct experience of it. So there is no need to strive for it elsewhere. It rests in and of itself. So do not seek it elsewhere. This, the ultimate meaning of suchness itself, is like the essence of the sun. I hold that it abides as a natural state of rest, unwavering, utter lucidity. It can be shown that other approaches are like attempts to create the already present sun by dispelling clouds and darkness through a process of effort and achievement. The transmission of supreme yoga, the sublime secret of Ati, is that of resting in genuine being, just as it is, naturally occurring timeless awareness, within the spacious state in which there is no distinction between self and other. Perfection in one, perfection in everything. The expanse within which all phenomena are subsumed is itself subsumed within the supreme state of spontaneous presence, a timeless and naturally lucid state of utter relaxation. Given this state of infinite evenness, open, relaxed, and spacious, there is no sense of spiritual practice, for there is no distinction between formal sessions and the periods in between. Everything is unrestricted, completely equal, and uninterrupted. Thick clouds vanish naturally when left alone in the sky. Similarly, the clouds of causality vanish without effort or striving, and the very essence of enlightenment shines in and of itself in the vault of the sky. Moreover, in the great perfection of awakened mind, there is no distinction between self and other. Everything is non-dual and all good, including samsara and nirvana. Yet what is also vital to note is that Longchenpa's view does not actually negate the duality of conventional reality or its causality. Indeed, Longchenpa makes a strong point of differentiating his view from nihilism or a whatever approach, evident in some contemporary misunderstandings and misappropriations of non-dualism. Due to the dynamic nature of being, Longchenpa explains how things manifest in dualistic perception, albeit in an illusory way. Due to the nature of spontaneity, present, awakened mind, there is a continuous display, the magical illusion of samsara and nirvana. Yet concurrently, within naturally occurring timeless awareness, a single basic space, all things are present in such a way that they are in essence non-dual. Continuous dualistic perceptions arise as a display due to the dynamic energy of awareness. In what is called awakened mind, there is no duality of sensory appearances and what the mind imputes about them. There is no renunciation or attainment, the expanse of the single sphere. This is timeless freedom. It is irrelevant whether or not one has realization. A yogin is content on the path equal to space with nothing needing to be done. And while Longchenpa states that ultimately there is no cause and effect, no concerted effort, he also cautions that the myriad display arises as the multiplicity of the universe of appearances and possibilities. So never say categorically, there is no cause and effect. Dualistic conventional reality may ultimately be an illusion, but this does not negate the conventional reality of suffering or harm or injustice or imply an unethicality. Longchenpa explains that the all good is ultimately real and that everything else, however, is passing and ephemeral. So Longchenpa therefore advises that let whatever happens happen and whatever manifests manifest. Let whatever occurs occur and whatever is be. Let whatever is anything at all be nothing at all. As Dowman instructs in Treksho non-meditation, whatever arises, let it arise. So Longchenpa further explains, whether eating, moving around, lying down, or sitting, day and night, you rest in infinite evenness, so that you experience the true nature of phenomenon as their equalness. There are no gods to worship, no demons to exercise, nothing to cultivate in meditation. This is the completely ordinary state. With this single state of evenness, the uncontrived ruler that has no pride, there is oneness, a relaxed and unstructured openness. How delightful. Things are timelessly ensured without having to be done. And being free of effort and achievement, you are content. In the timeless unity of sensory appearances and mind, the naturally settled state that is the true nature of phenomena, meditative absorption is experienced as an unwavering, ongoing flow. The most sublime meditation of all involves no differentiation or exclusion. It is spontaneously present as the superb, timelessly infinite monarch. The ongoing flow of utter lucidity, timeless and omnipresent, is spontaneously present within this context in which nothing is discarded or adopted. And so it is the most sublime enlightened intent, the basic space of phenomena, the nature of samsara and nirvana. This vast expanse, unwavering, indescribable, and equal to space, is timelessly and innately present in all beings. He adds, thoughts arise, abide, and are freed. Their simultaneous arising and being freed is uninterrupted. Since it is uninterrupted, there is no separation into cause and effect. Since there is no cause and effect, the abyss of samsara has been crossed. Since there is no longer an abyss, where could one go astray? The experience of blending with space without any division into outer and inner or in between arises as meditative absorption that is blissful, clear, and free of elaboration. So radical treksho non-meditation thereby involves a simply sitting with eyes open in a lucid state, letting both difficult and positive emotions, thoughts, and memories simply arise and dissolve in a natural state of rest and evenness. As Longchenpa instructs, this non-meditation does not have to be restricted to a specific meditative sitting practice, but can be undertaken in any ordinary moment, day and night. So Longchenpa further counsels, when something unwanted falls into your lap, you have a negative reaction, such as anger, dislike, envy, upset, irritation, anxiety, depression, mental anguish, or fear of death and rebirth. When such reactions arise as a display due to the dynamic energy, identify them as such. Do not renounce them, indulge in them, refine them away, transform them, look at them, or meditate on them. Rather, rest spontaneously in the single naturally settled state of evenness, free of the proliferation and resolution of conceptual frameworks, mind as a pure expanse of space in which things vanish naturally and leave no trace, arises with intensity from within, pristinely lucid. It is also of particular importance to know that compassionate responsiveness is one of the main qualities of this natural state, according to Longchenpa. So as already stated, the all good is not passive, it is dynamic, naturally arising as a compassionate responsiveness for the, quote, abundant benefit of all others. As Longchenpa explains, and I'm getting towards the very end here, mind itself is a vast expanse, the realm of unchanging space. Its indeterminate display is the expanse of the magical expression of its responsiveness. Everything is the adornment of basic space and nothing else. Outwardly and inwardly, things proliferating and resolving are the dynamic energy of awakened mind. Because this is nothing whatsoever, yet arises as anything at all, it is a marvelous and magical expression, amazing and superb. Since the display of responsiveness is immeasurable throughout the 10 directions, emanations issue forth to ensure total benefit for beings. Enlightened actions are revealed for as long as samsara lasts. This is impartial responsiveness, dynamic energy arising from the naturally settled essence of being, so that through its display, there is abundant benefit for others. So this is evident in the manifestation of teachers and more than human beings to guide all beings to realization of this natural state. Lobel states that therefore this compassionate responsiveness is ethical, and that therefore spontaneity is ethical. Lobel himself poetically concludes that Longchenpa's practical ethics is therefore an effortless way of being that cares for all beings by allowing everything to be. Moreover, when instructed by Longchenpa to simply rest, undistracted in one's natural state, our innate, dynamic, compassionate, and loving kind qualities will naturally arise and guide our actions to care for all beings. And this is explained and evidenced in Longchenpa's poetry and the example of his own life, spent often in retreat in nature. So the basic space of phenomena concludes with Longchenpa sharing this heartfelt wisdom with a wish to benefit all beings and not just humans. He concludes, and I conclude, by this virtue, may all beings without exception effortlessly reach the primordial ground. In all directions, may there be well-being, splendor, and wealth, so that everything that is wished for is spontaneously accomplished as though in a pure realm. May the drum of spiritual teachings resound and the victory banner of liberation be raised. May the sacred teachings never wane, but spread and flourish. Good fortune, good fortune, good fortune. Thank you.